This is the Freeheel Life Podcast, episode number 182. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. Welcome back. Good morning, everybody, and stoked to be here. Thanks for listening. Glad you're back. It's finally getting cold here. We're starting to get some snowstorms up in the mountains, and couldn't be happier about that because it means we get to go skiing finally. Well, let's hop right into it. I got some newsroom and notes. So appointments are open for the week. Super excited about how this is going. I know today's pretty stacked up already. We do have some openings left if you do want to book in. I think we have it set so you can book an hour prior. So if you're thinking, hey, I do need to drop my skis off for a tune, or I need to get a mount, or whatever else it may be, boot fit, heat molds, and whatnot, you can book that within an hour. So give us a shout. If you need something kind of on the spot, hit up customer service at freeheellife.com. We're kind of trying to keep tabs on that as well in case somebody does need to come by. Saturday went really well in terms of Ashley and I were there. We were able to do sort of part appointment, part just open doors, which was really nice because I was handling the boot fits, the boot molds, all that kind of stuff. And then Ashley was sort of able to field people coming in that just needed to shop and pick up stuff. So I think it worked pretty well. And then now, maybe after we get through the holiday this week, we may start looking at doing Friday and Mondays as well, having some open hours, just because we want to start getting demos out, get people on the snow. Obviously, you're skiing, and around the weekend times is a little more convenient for people to be able to walk in and not have to make an appointment. But the appointment thing from a convenience standpoint has worked really well, and we're really excited. We're getting good feedback. Everyone who's done it said it's worked pretty well. And you just book online, it sends you an email confirmation, and then all the info is on both sides, on customer and our side, so we can see what's going on. So definitely give that a shot. As far as the schedule this week, we are going to be closed on Thursday for Thanksgiving. Hopefully you'll spend some time with your families, and we'll be back on Friday and Saturday to, like I said, take appointments, and then we'll be open Saturday like we did this past week. Okay, moving on. New retailers. I did this last week for our Bluebird Day Gear products. We've got them in some new places that we're super excited about. Durango, Colorado, Backcountry Experience. We know that's a really strong area for Telemark, and they've got an event there at Purgatory, and we are excited to be in Backcountry Experience. So be sure, I think those shipped out last week, so hopefully they'll be on the shelves. Leashes, levers. I think they've got leashes and levers, maybe smile plates too. Go check that out. Say hello for us. Killington, Vermont, East Coast at Base Camp. Awesome supporter of Telemark skiing. They've got new owners actually. So it's good to see that continuing in that zone. Right around that New England area, Intervale, New Hampshire, Ragged Mountain Equipment also is carrying our Bluebird products. Go check that out as well. We have a new store locator on freeheellife.com. You can go there and see where these shops are at, their websites, addresses, contacts. So if they are in your area and you can go visit them, you can find out all the information there. If you want to be a retailer of Bluebird or Freeheel Life products, hit me up direct at podcast@freeheellife.com, and I'll get stuff going. We'll get the conversation rolling. And we would love to do that. As far as product goes, leashes and smile plates are in stock. We've got levers we're going to be working on this week to get another batch of those going. So in case you're waiting around wondering about that. And then we've got our we've got new rental boots showing up this week, and we're going to be getting those all molded and ready. So we will be having the demos. We've been organizing all the kids rentals, season rentals that you can do. Hit us up about that, and we're happy to accommodate. We've still got plenty of boots and stuff to send out, and looking forward to getting some more young people on the hill. That's a fun program, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that in the future. So today I just wanted to do a quick podcast just to kind of get the week rolling. Nothing too deep and crazy. But I wanted to talk a little bit about why I started the podcast and not really talk about why I wanted to start the podcast, but one of the reasons is always talking about history. And many of you that have telemarked for a long time probably know some of these facts, but I'm kind of doing this as a standalone podcast for people that may come along that are maybe new to telemark or maybe don't know much about the history. And I just wanted to do 5 fun facts about telemark history you may not know and talk a little bit about that. So if you're a deep dive guru of telemark, you're probably already going to know most of these, but I wanted to do this. Sometimes I think it's important to do these little standalone podcasts. I've tried to do this over the summer too with the videos on YouTube, is try to do some, more beginner and intermediate stuff too, because I think a lot of times people that we've done these things for so long, we stop remembering to do the beginner stuff as well for people getting into it. So 5 fun facts about telemark history that you may not know. I'm going to start with the most basic one, which is, it seems obvious to a lot of people, but this is actually something that a lot of people do not know. And as someone who has telemark tattooed on my knuckles, I know that to the average person, it's definitely a conversation starter. They may know what the type of skiing is, or they may know that once you explain that it looks like you're lunging down the mountain, then they know what telemark is. But a lot of people don't know that telemark is a traditional region in Norway. It's a former county and a current electoral district in southern Norway. Back in 2020, Telemark merged with the former county of Vestfold to form the county of Vestfold og Telemark. And Telemark borders the traditional regions and former counties of Vestfold, Buskerud, Hordaland, and Rogaland, and Aust Agder. You Norwegians are going to hate me. Terrible pronunciation. Oh, that's so bad. The name Telemark means the mark of Thalir, the ancient North Germanic tribe that inhabited what is now known as Upper Telemark in the migration period and the Viking Age. And for those, if you haven't been to Telemark or looked it up, it's not far from, you can fly into Oslo and drive, a couple hours and you're in the Telemark region. There's obviously lots of different towns and, I've talked a lot about Morgedal being sort of the center. It's the cradle of skiing. And, there's some cool loops that you can drive, and there's a lot of history, up in that area. I think one of the towns is Skien in Telemark. That's pretty well known. I think that might be where one of the authors from the Sondre Norheim book that I've talked about lives. And then we have driven up to Rjukan, up near Gaustatopen and some of those areas. That's sort of the famous area where Hitler tried to get the heavy water during World War II and sort of that whole story. So that's all in that Telemark region of Norway. Telemark's been one of Norway's most important industrial regions for the centuries, marked in particular by the Norsk Skog Union paper mills in Grenland and the Norsk hydro heavy water and fertilizer production in Upper Telemark, which was kind of where I was talking about in Rjukan. Beautiful area. It's a county, so that's sort of the first thing. Is it's a county, it's a region. I actually was reading this. I pulled some of this, obviously, just off some internet references, and just kind of wanted to get more of the regional aspect of what it is, not just the ski aspect of it. But it sounds like they're actually, maybe they voted to make it back to Telemark only and not that combination of the Vestfold thing. So I guess that's happening in January, it sounds like. So there's some political voting background on Telemark in the more recent days. Beautiful area. If you get there, I highly suggest it. Some beautiful mountains, lots of rolling hill terrain, and very fun to go to. So Well, let's move on to number 2. I talked to if you're one of the Black Level subscribers on the YouTube channel. This past week, I did sort of this deep dive on Telemark boots and really wanted to focus on what boots look like when Telemark started. And I literally just had a pile of boots and I was sort of pulling boots up one at a time and showing sort of the evolution of some of the key boots. Obviously, not every single boot that was made, but enough to show what boots look like kind of through these different eras. And I started all the way back in the 1860s because I always thought this was an interesting thing that I learned about Telemark, and I always thought was a fun piece of history to pass to other people. Because when I went to Morgadal the first time, we obviously, there's a little museum there. We got to see where the people lived. Obviously, people still live there. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was their boots were not, I mean, when we think of flimsy boots, these were incredibly flimsy leather boots. But the thing that I learned that I thought would be another history piece to share with you is I found out that a lot of the Telemark skiers in Morgadal used to freeze their boots at night. And why they froze their boots at night, they would leave them in their ski bindings in the skis outside the house, and they would freeze the boots. I don't know if I don't think they soaked them in water, but I don't know. Whatever you could do to get them stiff, they would freeze the boots at night, all because they wanted stiff boots in the morning. Contrary to what I had always thought when I first started Telemark skiing was you always hear sort of like Telemark's not what it used to be. It used to be 3-pin bindings and floppy boots, And so it's that is obviously a part of the history, but in the beginning, these Telemark skiers were actually freezing their boots to get stiffer boots because they wanted more lateral stability. And it makes sense because when you've got bindings like they did, which were very active bindings, you had a toe loop, you had a heel, not a cable, but I mean, these were birch, made out of birch twigs, essentially, kind of woven together. I guess that's the best way to describe it. But they had a heel binding, and you needed a stiffer boot to drive these skis. And it makes sense that they froze their boots. So, it wasn't until probably the reintroduction of Telemark that in the 1970s in the US that you get sort of this different style of boots because that's what was available. We'll talk a little bit about the skis later. I've got another little history tidbit in this list that talks about that, but I always thought that was pretty interesting. So the original Telemark skiers, they liked stiff boots, they liked lateral stability, and they wanted a stiff boot to be able to drive their skis down the hill. So that's your second little tidbit for this morning. All right, so number 3, more on the historical character of Telemark, old Sondre Norheim. This is one that I've always found incredibly interesting. Is you may or may not know that Sondre Norheim is actually buried in North Dakota in the United States. Funny enough, it's the only state that I've never been to. How weird is that? So I guess I'll have to make the pilgrimage up to old North Dakota. I don't make it up that high or that far north very often. But Sondre Norheim is actually buried in North Dakota. The guy that started that is credited with the Telemark turn. So March 9th, 1897, Sondre passed away while living in the North Dakota prairie. The burial was delayed until 1898, probably because of the hard winter. And he was buried in an unmarked grave 8 kilometers from his farm. Sondre had not told his neighbors and friends about his skiing fame because the grave was unmarked. No one knew where the legendary skier was buried. Dorothy Lyon of Atlanta, Georgia, a great grandchild of Sondre, happened to find that her great-grandfather's skiing feats were recognized in the Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 20 of the 1955 edition, that refers to him as a pioneer not only in the slalom and jumping, but also in making skis. The Britannica describes Sondre's impact on the development of skiing, the skiing environment in Morgedal, Sondre's performance in the important Christiana Oslo skiing competition in 1868, and the turning techniques and his equipment. It also reports that the Telemark and Christiana styles were adopted by other Norwegian skiers and spread rapidly to the Alpine countries. So it's right, this is like a lot of history, things get lost, and this. I think it's a testament to a couple things, and I guess number one, it's a cool little history tidbit that this skier from Morgedal, Norway, this small town, and essentially is credited with helping create both the Telemark and the Christiana styles, which later sort of becomes alpine skiing, parallel style, is makes it all the way to the United States and sort of just doesn't bring it up. And I think I've always thought that's cool because obviously he didn't really feel the need to tell anybody, and he was obviously doing it for himself and skiing. And I've always thought that was really cool. But super crazy that he ended up in North Dakota. I didn't really say where, but I believe it's as close to a place called Denby, North Dakota, which is outside of Minot. And there's sort of a relationship with Minot. They've got a thing called Hostfest, and that it's sort of sister cities, I think, with Morgedal. There's two statues, these bronze statues of Sondre Norheim, that are identical. That one of them is in Morgedal looking up towards his old homestead and where he was born, and the other one's in Minot. I have not obviously seen the one. I need to get to Hostfest and go check that out. But yeah, there's a really cool relationship between North Dakota and Morgedal in Norway, and kind of the birthplace and the place of death for Sondre Norheim. And I always thought that was kind of a fun little tidbit. All of what I'm pulling from, if you are interested in Telemark history, you can go to the website, sondrenorheim.com. I referenced that book that called Sondre Norheim, that is written by, I was trying to remember the authors. I don't want to mess up the names anyways, but a lot of those excerpts are on the website and sort of goes through a lot of that. So if you can't access the book, the website's a great place to go find that. And it's got a lot of that information, and it links to some of these other historical items that you can get, and the events going on in Minot and whatnot. So moving on to the next one. Telemark skis in the early days were fairly wide and used side cut. It wasn't until back in the 1970s that we saw narrower, skinny skis. And this is probably one of the biggest, maybe the biggest misconceptions of Telemark skiing, and really was a difficult thing for the evolution of Telemark, I think, in a lot of ways, because we weren't really, in our era of Telemark, the skinny ski thing, it lasted a long time. I mean, even into when I started in the early 90s, it was interesting because I remember, for instance, let me give you an example. Even in Telemark racing, that had kind of started probably all the way back in the 70s. You got it in the 80s. Even by the mid 1990s, when I started trying a couple Telemark races, they actually had a width limit on the skis. Now, I'm assuming, I don't know if this is totally fact, but I'm assuming that the width limit was sort of maybe some sort of a tradition of sorts, where they didn't want wide skis, because mid 90s, a lot of people were starting to take alpine skis and mount Telemark bindings on it. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But you definitely had sort of, as we evolve in the evolution of gear, there's always sort of some holdouts, and maybe not wanting to go into the next realm of things. And I think skinny skis were one of them. Well, so that's why I wanted to bring this up. So when you go back to when the Telemark turn actually began, the skis were much wider. I was trying to see if I could find an actual measurement of like underfoot. I mean, I would probably guess some of the skis that we were able to ski on and see at the museum, I mean, they had to be 80 millimeters underfoot. I mean, wide enough that when you look at them and you try to think in comparison to what happened in the 1970s, I mean, it's a completely different ski and much more side cut than a backcountry Nordic ski in the 1970s and 1980s. So definitely interesting. Again, and the bindings were obviously something else that were a part of that. Like I said, they froze their boots to drive these skis, and the bindings and the skis probably felt. Now, I'm not even going to say probably. I know because I've skied on these. They feel different. They feel more like a modern ski, probably a little stiffer, but they definitely feel like a more modern ski in terms of width. And side note on those two, I always think it's almost like they figured out the early tip rise thing back then, way early on, which is kind of interesting. So so that's it. I was going to mention one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting about skis, specifically back in the history of Telemark, is the ski makers made their mark on the ski with the way that they shaped the tip. So there was different ornate ways of carving the tip of the ski that indicated who was the ski maker. And I always thought that was kind of a cool nod to the craftsmanship of the ski. And, obviously it carried on. I would assume that that's what's carried on over the years, because if you look at a lot of our modern skis now, the logo of the brand is typically on the tip. Not in all cases, but that's, I think, fairly common. So, yeah. So there you go. Telemark skis were pretty wide and had side cut, not like the narrow ones in the 70s. And we're going to move on to the last, number 5, little history tidbit you may not know about Telemark history. And I have definitely spoken about this one because it's one of the ones that I think is most interesting, especially in current times. We are starting to see a resurgence of the lurk, which is sort of a long staff, and it is almost like your Telemark skiing with almost like a kayak paddle sort of motion, sort of back and forth. And again, on a couple of my trips over to Morgadal, I thought one of the interesting things about that is that the people of Telemark did not actually use lurks. They used a short little walking stick that was much, much shorter. Probably, maybe call it 3 feet tall. More of think of something more like a cane. Maybe not with the curved part of a cane, but sort of more of a short walking stick they could use to pick the ice out of their boots. Because I guess they were also getting snow buildup underneath their bindings and their boots. Pick the snow out, and then they would hold it in one hand rather than two, using it like a lurk. Now, it doesn't mean that people that made Telemark turns maybe didn't use lurks somewhere, but the people to that specific region actually used these shorter sticks. A lot of it had to do with how prominent jumping was amongst people of Telemark, because jumping, and if you think jumping, the only other ski discipline that uses the Telemark stance is ski jumping, because a lot of the people in this region, that's where this all came from. And also, ski jumping is using a Nordic binding, and then you're able to land in a Telemark stance, which is a good stable base position. But bringing that back to the whole idea of this little staff that they used, is the good Telemark skiers wanted to show their jumping expertise by way of showing their balance, and they didn't want to have anything in their hands that allowed them to brace themselves upon landing. So the idea was to keep your hands up. And so I've talked about it in previous podcasts way back when, but sometimes they would actually hold like a pine bough, like a small piece of a pine tree or something in their hand, sort of as an ornament, to show that their hand was up and that they had this balance, and that was something important to them. So yeah, that's basically it. Those are your 5 history pieces to kick off your Monday morning and let you know some fun facts about Telemark history that you may not know, and now you know. So I'll be back next Monday. Looking forward to a great week. Don't forget, we are not open on Thursday, but we are appointments are available today, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Saturday, we're going to be open doors as well. And if you need anything, reach out to customer service at freeheellife.com. And looking forward to another great week with y'all now that we've got some snow on the ground. So until next week, spread Telemark always. Peace.